A young KGB officer secretly watches his empire collapse overnight and quietly begins building a new one from the ashes. Millions lost their savings, their pride, and their faith in a crumbling nation. One bombing would quickly change Russia forever. One oligarch would vanish behind bars. One law would rewrite his future in power. But what happens after 2036 remains uncertain. The Crucible of Dresden, the KGB formative years. Long before he ran a country, Vladimir Putin was a quiet spy. For 15 years, he worked for the KGB, the Soviet Union's secret intelligence service. His most important job was in Dresden, East Germany, from 1985 to 1990. This was not a calm posting. It was the middle of a storm. Putin watched from the inside as the Berlin Wall came crashing down. He saw Soviet power crumble in front of his eyes, with no one back home stepping in to stop it. That moment left a mark on him. Some historians believe it planted a deep fear of chaos and a distrust of Western movements that push for change. It also taught him a hard lesson. Control can vanish overnight if you are not the one holding it tightly. That lesson would follow him for the rest of his life. But what he did next would shock even his closest friends. The wild 90s, navigating the St. Petersburg bureaucracy. When Putin came home, his country was falling apart. There was no money, no order, and no clear rules. He landed a job in St. Petersburg, working as a top advisor to the city's mayor, Anatoly Sobchak. This was Russia's Wild West. Businessmen, criminals, and politicians all fought for power at the same time. Putin learned to move between all of them without getting hurt. He became known as calm, careful, and incredibly efficient, someone who could get deals done when everyone else was stuck. This city became his training ground. Every negotiation, every risky deal, and every quiet compromise shaped the leader he would later become. People who worked with him back then said he never showed his cards. He watched, he waited, and he learned exactly how power really worked behind closed doors. That skill would soon carry him somewhere much bigger. The Moscow Ascent, from bureaucrat to prime minister. In 1996, Putin packed his bags and moved to Moscow. Nobody outside Russia knew his name yet, but inside the government, he climbed fast. In just 3 years, he was placed in charge of the FSB, the agency that replaced the old KGB. Then, in August 1999, something even bigger happened. President Boris Yeltsin, weak and unpopular, chose Putin to be prime minister. Yeltsin's inner circle was scared. They needed someone loyal, tough, and organized to protect them once Yeltsin left power. Putin fit perfectly. He did not come from a famous family or a rich background. He rose because he was useful, disciplined, and trusted by the right people at the right moment. Almost nobody expected what came next. Within months, this quiet former spy would be handed the entire country. And a shocking crisis was about to make that possible. The 1999 crisis and the Second Chechen War. In September 1999, tragedy struck Russia. A string of apartment bombings tore through several cities, killing hundreds of innocent people while they slept. The nation was terrified. People wanted answers, and they wanted someone strong to protect them. Putin, still new as prime minister, responded with immediate and forceful action. He launched a major military campaign against separatist fighters in Chechnya, promising to hunt them down without mercy. His blunt, no-nonsense language made him instantly popular. For a public exhausted by weakness and chaos, Putin looked like exactly what Russia needed. Almost overnight, a man nobody recognized became a national symbol of strength. His approval ratings shot up in a way nobody predicted. This single crisis changed the direction of his entire career. But the true turning point was still just months away, and it would arrive in the strangest possible way. The transition of power, New Year's Eve, 1999. On December 31, 1999, something stunning happened on live television. President Boris Yeltsin, tired and unpopular, announced his resignation during his New Year's address. In an instant, he handed power to Vladimir Putin, naming him acting president. This was not a normal transfer of power. It gave Putin a massive advantage before any election even happened. The presidential vote was moved up to March 2000, and Putin won it easily, with 52.9% of the vote. Many Russians barely had time to learn who this new leader really was before he was already in charge. Critics say this timing skipped the kind of open debate a democracy usually needs. Supporters say it brought fast, needed stability to a nation in crisis. Either way, a virtually unknown former spy was now the most powerful man in Russia. But the hardest part of his job hadn't even started yet. Taming the oligarchs, the consolidation of domestic capital. When Putin took office, a small group of super-rich businessmen, known as oligarchs, controlled huge chunks of Russia's economy. They had grabbed state industries for cheap during the chaotic 1990s. Putin saw this as a direct threat to his authority. He made his message clear fast: keep your money, but stay out of politics. One oligarch ignored the warning. Mikhail Khodorkovsky, one of the richest men in the country, was arrested, and his massive oil company Yukos was taken over by the state. It sent a chilling message to every other billionaire in Russia. From that point on, wealth and political loyalty became tightly linked. Business leaders who cooperated kept their fortunes. Those who challenged the Kremlin risked losing everything, including their freedom. This single arrest reshaped Russia's entire economic elite, and it was only the beginning of a much larger transformation. The rebirth of the vertical of power. Russia is enormous, spanning 11 time zones, and it has always struggled to stay united. Putin worried that without strict control, the country could fracture into pieces. His solution was something called the vertical of power. In simple terms, this meant every layer of government answered directly upward to the Kremlin. Regional governors, who used to be elected by local citizens, were no longer chosen that way. Independent media outlets faced growing pressure, and many were shut down or taken over. Step by step, decision-making became centralized in Moscow. Supporters argued this was necessary to stop the disorder of the 1990s from returning. Critics warned it was quietly erasing local democracy across the entire country. Either way, Putin was building something far bigger than a temporary policy. He was constructing a system designed to outlast any single crisis or any single leader's term. Energy superpower, the economic boom era. Between 2000 and 2008, Russia experienced an economic miracle. Global oil and gas prices soared, and Russia had massive reserves of both. Money poured into the country like never before. The government used this wealth to pay off old Soviet-era debts and build up huge cash reserves. Ordinary citizens felt the difference too. Wages went up, pensions improved, stores filled with products that had been impossible to find a decade earlier. For millions of Russians, life finally felt stable again after years of hardship. This created an unspoken agreement between Putin and the public. In exchange for economic comfort and national pride, people largely accepted less political freedom and less public debate. It felt like a fair trade to many at the time. But oil prices don't rise forever, and neither does quiet public patience. A storm was building just beyond the horizon. Geopolitical realignment, from cooperation to confrontation. After the September 11 attacks, Putin reached out to the West, offering cooperation against terrorism. For a while, relations seemed to be improving, but underneath the surface, tension was quietly building. Putin grew increasingly frustrated as NATO, the Western military alliance, kept expanding closer to Russia's borders. In 2007, he stood before world leaders at the Munich Security Conference and delivered a stunning speech. He directly challenged the idea that America should lead a single unipolar world. It shocked diplomats across the globe. This wasn't just a speech, it was a warning shot. Just 1 year later, in 2008, Russian forces entered Georgia. Then, in 2014, Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine, sending shockwaves through the international community. Putin was no longer playing defense. He was actively reshaping the global balance of power in Russia's favor. And the world was only beginning to grasp how far this rivalry could go. The long-term presidency and the 2020 constitutional reforms. Russia's constitution had clear limits on how long a president could serve. Putin found a clever way around them. From 2008 to 2012, he temporarily stepped into the role of prime minister, while his ally, Dmitry Medvedev, held the presidency. Many called it a tandem, but few doubted who truly held the power. Then in 2020, Putin pushed through sweeping changes to Russia's constitution. These reforms reset his term count, legally allowing him to remain president until 2036. International observers raised serious concerns about fairness and long-term democratic stability. Supporters claimed the country needed continuity and a steady hand during uncertain times. Whatever the true motive, one thing became undeniable. Putin had built a system where his own power could stretch across decades, not just years. From a quiet KGB officer in Dresden to a leader shaping Russia's future for over 30 years, his journey remains one of the most remarkable transformations in modern history. From a shadowy KGB officer in Dresden to the president of Russia for over 2 decades, Vladimir Putin's rise to power remains one of the most extraordinary transformations in modern history. His journey through collapse, crisis, and calculated control reshaped an entire nation's identity. This Vladimir Putin biography reveals how one man moved from KGB to president, building a system built to outlast him. If this look at life under Vladimir Putin gripped you, subscribe for more documentary breakdowns like this one. History's most powerful figures rarely rise by accident, and his story proves it.